kill you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Zaku Talk. G versus Wing this season. I am your host, Patrick Skeyhill. Joining me this episode and every episode this season is the Phantom of the Opera,
Bob Scary.
Yeah, okay. That seems fine.
I'm not a singer.
That's okay.
Certainly not operatic.
No. And of course, on the audio boards is Lev Van Rensselaer. We will talk about episode 38 of G and Wing this episode. But before we do that, Bob, how's your week been going?
Week's been going okay. I finally got my voice straw in, and this is probably going to be my nerd corner piece. Yeah, I got to use it. I put in an audition on Sunday as a last-minute thing for a animated comic that is looking to happen. And it's for some of the... I don't know if they're recurring, but it's a lot of it's three monsters, alien things, and the announcer, the mystery announcer. So it made me think of Stalker a bit, but I didn't read it as him, of course. So yeah, who knows? If I'm lucky, I might be working with a bunch of really cool indie individuals, including a couple of well-known voice actors on the anime scene.
There's no announcer in Stalker. What are you talking about?
Stalker is the name of the announcer from G Gundam.
I thought you were talking about the movie Stalker.
What movie is called Stalker? I'm sure there's like 8 of them, but which one were you thinking?
Well, the most famous one, the one that came out in the 70s by Andrei Tarkovsky.
Yeah, when did you know me to be a Tarkovsky guy?
I don't know. It's one of the most well-known sci-fi movies of all time. I just thought you knew it.
You thought wrong.
It spawned a franchise of video games. I know you're in that world.
It spawned video games?
Called Stalker, yeah. Because it's such a cool setting, they wanted to make a video game. Several video games in it.
We're going to move on from this and move directly to what you've been up to this week, Scale.
Well, there's the big update. I didn't know the announcer even had a name in the show. Does he ever get called
him by
that?
name once, maybe twice, but it's mostly in the notes off screen.
Gotcha. All right. Sounds fine there. What happened to me this week? Looking at LED or warehouses, studios that have LED volumes, trying to get ready for that. Saw some of the early character art, concept art for this animated project that the LED volumes are for. The illustrator is doing sort of a pretty good job there. Just some minor tweaking, but her instincts are sort of spot on, as we were hoping. My spring film, One Body, is starting to get into some festivals. Not big ones, but tier 2 festivals. Perfectly fine there.
Yeah, well, you start there and then you go up to tier 1, yeah?
So now that, hopefully. So now that we haven't heard back from a lot of the tier 1, so we don't know. But we can settle for this. Hopefully I can find a way to travel out to them. They're all on the East Coast in the breadbasket, but we'll see where the other ones happen around that time, and maybe we can make a little trip out of it. That might be sort of all the big news. Oh, we had the location scout for the pilot. The old location was being sold, so we had to find a new one. And the new one's so wacky. It's crazy looking places, random, ridiculous shit everywhere. I love it.
I know that you do, and I can't wait for you to mark it as your own.
Yeah, I mean, it does change a lot of our art design, because the other location was kind of this more modernist, Kubrick-esque, black-white, pure thing, and so now we're in a bit different aesthetic. And I thought, this was the aesthetic I had in mind all along, but I was told that's not what middle class looks like anymore, so... They wanted to go with the modern thing, and they thought the other one was like poor people or white trash or stuff. All right, Bob, why don't you tell me about episode 38 of G Gundam?
Episode 38, Domon vs. Argo, Charging Bolt Gundam. Or, in Japanese, Domontai Arugo, Totsugeki Bolto Gundam. The only word here that might be new to our listeners and you, Skeyhill, because you do know Tai at this point being versus, as well as the names of the main character-related subjects, is Totsugeki. Totsugeki is directly translated as charge. Geki, the suffix here, is often related to active verbs, actions to be had. It's not that you would add it like an ing, but it is always giving the idea of an active word, at least per my understanding.
What determines when they would use tai versus when they would use basasu?
Whether or not they wanted to do it as just in their language, or if they want to use verses, and basasu is literally just them expanding the word to work with their phonetics. Because
what's the connotation that each one has?
I really do think that sometimes the verses aspect is just to apply, as I mentioned an episode or 3 back, the idea of it not just being a direct fight as we often associate it here, but also a joining of forces. That is my understanding. Again, I am a layman Japanese language sociologist. I have no credentials. This is purely weeb speak right now.
Okay, well, give us that plot summary.
Yes, certainly. Andrew Graham of Neo Canada is facing off against Argo. Argo goes into hyper mode and uses a new technique, the Gaia Crusher, to create mountains in the ring. Argo wins. The next match is a tag team match between the Domon and Allenby team and the Argo and Andrew team. Prime Minister Juan kidnaps the creator of the Berserker system and creates one of his own. At the beginning of the match, Argo splits the ring in two so he and Domon can fight by themselves. Juan activates the Berserker system and sends it up to 100%. Domon and Argo are fighting, and Domon beats Argo. All of a sudden, Allenby comes rushing out, declaring she will kill Argo because he is her and Domon's enemy. Andrew sacrifices himself for Argo because he finally remembers how Argo tried helping his wife in the space station.
All right, over here, episode 38 of Gundam Wing, we have the birth of Queen Relina, or in the Japanese, Queen Relina Tanjo. So
correct.
Tanjo is birth.
Tanjo is literally just birth. As a fun fact for the handful of possible Toku fans that are listening here, we would all recognize that word from Kamen Rider Den-O, the, I believe still to this point, highest grossing and most prolific section of the Kamen Rider series. It spawned several movies. It spawned a side series of episodes and films. And it often goes towards acknowledging the first of these things called Imagin, Momotaros, named after Momotaro, the Peach hero, where he always enters every episode in the fight with Ore Sanjo, I have arrived. But Ore Tanjo was used as the title for an episode, a film in which they lost and regained their ability to fight the good fight.
Informed by Duo, Catra approaches Trowa and asks for forgiveness. As Catra and Noin defend the colony against both the White Fang and the Romefeller soldiers, Trowa, despite the fact he still remembers nothing, agrees to help out. Agrees to help them out. Queen Relina eliminates all international boundaries and founds the World Nation in hopes of bringing about peace. We'll see how that goes. All right. Episode 38 of G Gundam. I don't know. I'm not feeling it. There's not overt complaints I have, and yet I'm feel a little let down by this episode. I don't know what I was expecting.
It is the most tame of them, as opposed to the other 3 where we see them building up or hiding their abilities. We literally open up with, yeah, we already know Argo's going to go this way, so we're just going to show it off to you and focus more on the tension of what Graham's going to do during this fight. Is he going to try and kill Argo by throwing an axe to his back while he's in the middle of fighting? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think, the first half sort of sets up a lot, and I am interested a lot. The first half piques my interest, but then everything kind of gets resolved very easily. And there's also this hanging Chad kind of plot line where the other 3 fighters before him, like they get not resolutions, but we can kind of guess, or there's like a consequence to their losing that actually ends up working in their favor. But we don't really know what's going on with Argo's friends by the end of this episode. And there could be like a threat to them because he's the only one of these guys we've seen lose twice now.
So here is a fun little factoid for those wonderful viewers at home. And I call them viewers because I'm hoping that they're watching along with us at this point.
Yeah.
If you watch the preview for the next episode, you know that this is effectively a two-parter.
Oh, I did not know.
So there is still more story to be had here. They resolve what's happening in this at the beginning of the next episode while also incorporating another kind of fight.
Yeah. I would have liked to see more in this kind of treacherous dynamic between Canada Man and Russia Guy. I don't know, the show really wanted to set up this one-on-one battle between Domon and Argo, but at this point, we already know Domon's just going to beat everybody all the time anyway. So I don't really need more of that. And I thought, well, we've got 3 of these in a row, so if they want to play up this betrayal aspect, that could make this fight more interesting and a little more unpredictable based on kind of diverting even more from the formula we've already seen. But he pretty much just watch. Then he has this change of heart, and then he sacrifices himself for Argo. I would have liked to seen that earned a little better for my money. And then she gets, I don't remember what happened with her at the end. She's like still screaming, but she's not fighting people anymore.
Allenby?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, at the end, Allenby is still being controlled by the Berserker system that Wanyon Fat had made. Yeah. And I don't know if they say on your side that the individual from Neo Sweden, Neo Sweden's Nobel Gundam team, that individual that's always kinder to Allenby is apparently the creator of the Berserker system. And while Wanyon Fat had his people make their own variant on it, the only thing they didn't know was Allenby's brain frequency. So they tortured the hell out of this individual to get her frequency so they could shoot the bad juju rays at her head and just cranked it up to max. Because as we're seeing, he's an asshole.
Yes, I think it might have been interesting. Yeah, if this 2-on-2 fight if all these storylines happen like in that fight. So like, while Domon and Argo are trying to settle things for whatever reason, then Grizzly Man tries to backstab Argo, and then Allenby's going crazy. So Domon's trying to stop her from causing utter chaos. And now, these kind of intersecting things happen. You could have had a really dynamic fight there.
You say that. Graham, because I'm not going to stoop to your level. You say that Graham was going to backstab him. I know that the implication throughout the first half, 2/3 of the episode are implying that this is a great opportunity. In my side, with the Japanese, there is no concrete statement that he's going to do it. He says that he wants to Domon, but throughout the thing, Domon, his words keep echoing through Graham's head that if you are a true Gundam fighter, you need to speak with your fists. And rather than Graham put himself in the way and, possibly give in to his desires for revenge, he's allowing Domon's fight with Argo to be a conversation that he can listen into. By doing so, he learns that, in fact, Argo is willing to die for other people because he's not a ruthless killer, and that was just a way for Graham to resolve his own emotional heartache. There has to be someone that is to blame here, and it's not me, so it's the asshole that was over there over her.
My 2 rebuttals to that is, if the show's going to spend all this time for 10 minutes telling me his be a good opportunity for revenge, you got to sort of deliver a little bit. Or just not have those lines in there. Save me some time. And instead of Domon telling him about the fist learning before the fight happens, it should happen during the fight. That's how he tries to get him to stop fighting Argo. And Argo could, as Allenby's jumping around, maybe he's trying to hurt Grizzly Guy and Argo gets in the way. or she's trying to hurt Domon because Domon's trying to keep the fight even by having her not go berserk, and then Argo kind of blocks him, and then Grizzly Guy can learn this lesson after he's been trying to sabotage. And then now you kind of get, that adds again to the dynamism of it. And he doesn't have to try overtly or doesn't have to try much, but a little bit, something there would be nice instead of him just watching and then he learns a lesson and then it's just a little lazy there. This is where I think you could maximize the potential of this episode.
And that's fair. I feel like while it could use some tightening up, the general beats that they have do what they're trying to do. We see that this is supposed to be more tension and less explosion, Well, that's the thing. I think changing these adds the tension. I'm expecting tension after what the first half sets up, and the second half doesn't deliver sort of on anything, or they quickly rush through things by doing it 1-to-1-to-1. I think you could do more. Would you have cut the Nastasha dinner scene?
No, so this is no different than what's his name? Saishi cooking. This is just a little thing that I like. I like seeing that relationship. And that's a nice change from what she was at the beginning when it was pure, you got to do this. And I like that Nastasha now has to both answer to her masters, but also wants to help out this fighter that she's bonded to. That I would like to see more of her. That's an interesting, that's very interesting.
She gets a little more love over the course of the next handful of episodes before we get out of here.
Awesome. Great. Give me more
not
of
a
that.
lot, but a little more than what she had been getting.
Yeah, and it's not like this big, she's not there confessing her love. It's just sort of listen, they're going to keep fucking with you. I'm sorry that they're doing this. I don't agree with it. That's all I need in that moment. Love it.
I agree with you. I think that she does a wonderful job as being a good support for Argo, because every other person seems to have great supporters, and this whole time we've been just watching Argo effectively be pushed into fighting.
Yeah.
To finally have some humanity from the person that he has been committed to, in a more judicial sense, but he's been committed to her for the better part of a year.
Yeah.
They have to have something now. It can't just be you stay on your side and I stay on my side. It's you either grow closer together or one of you is going to attempt to kill the other.
Yeah, it's just this natural thing when you're both in the trenches together. It just happens. Even if they hated each other at the beginning, there it is. And then Argo grabs a whole fish with his hands and eats it like an ear of corn. Hilarious.
Absolutely. Was there anything else that you wanted to head nod or point out from the episode before we continue forward?
So this is based on Argo's background. This is the hardest, where I think having that crazy it would technically be a 4-on-4 battle at that point, because they would all be kind of fighting against each other. Where I think that helps is because Argo is sort of the least believable one in this, we want to see who's the better fighter. Because he's the reluctant fighter. So I think this is a way to not have to go to that and have that feel kind of out of character or fall a little flat. And still have Domon eventually defeat Argo there. Because I guess he says he can't afford to lose, but I'm still not fully understanding why he can't. Because they can still take out the Dark
Argo
Gundam.
Can't afford to lose?
No, why? Because Argo doesn't say it. I wish Argo said it. Because that feels true. But Domon, when his fist is getting crushed by Argo's attack, he's like, no, I can't afford to lose. And then he now has yet another super secret attack. But I'm just like, well, Domon, I think you could. You don't need to win all your matches to defeat the Dark Gundam, right? So I'm just confused here.
Okay, well, that's fair. So we have talked about not being able to afford to lose because, to my understanding, they know the stakes for each other's setup here, that they have to get to the final bout, which is going to be a whole other thing that will happen very soon.
Yep. This Battle Royale thing you're talking about?
Yes, the Battle Royale.
Okay.
But when that Battle Royale happens, I'm sure that there is some sort of a ranking system when you go in, and the closer you are to the top, the more likely it is that you will be able to achieve what you're trying to achieve for your nation, right? And in the case of the Shuffle Alliance, their personal goals, because they all seem to have personal goals associated to having to work with their nation. I think the only one that eschews that is George Desan, because he's really just doing it because he's playing Knight.
Yeah.
But the other four actually have some major stakes in being a part of this. One is trying to, save his father and keep everything from dying. One has to save his friends while also not exploding due to a huge gas bomb attached to his chest.
They should talk about that more.
So I noticed something, and I'm going to bring it up in a second. I have to get rid of the other two on my list. You have Saisaishi, who not only was trying to revive the Shaolin Temple because he's been with the martial art forever, but his dad, it was his dying wish to have his son do that, and having suddenly learned that is even more driven to do so. And then lastly, you have Chippity Crockett, who's like, I don't want to ruin the lives of Americans by seeing me a direct representative of what America says everybody can do, not do it.
Yeah, he seems to want to create this Superman effect.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
Americans, yeah.
That is a perfect way to describe that. But then you have George Desan, who's just like, I'm a knight because it's an honorable thing, and my family would have wanted that, so I'm a knight.
You gotta be nice to my nation so that they have pride or honor or something.
Yeah, I inspire people with my gardening capabilities.
Yeah, great.
But having said all that, I did notice, and it didn't really dawn on me until this episode, his cockpit is hit with a green spot that looks exactly like his bomb. So it's probably intentional, because if he were to get struck in the bomb, it may do something with regards to the suit. Although, having said that, he intentionally has to keep the straps over the bomb.
Yeah.
Or the straps over the suit so the bomb might not get connected. But I think everybody understands that this brace that's on his chest is not because it's a fashion statement.
Yeah, that's I'll be on the lookout for that next time. I haven't noticed that yet.
Yeah. But, it only happens when he does his suit up sequence. You might have to go back to his first or second major appearance in order to see him do the strap thing. Or you can maybe wait a few episodes and they'll probably do it as part of their show lengthening runtime stuff. So anyway, I to pull it back to the main point of it, the stakes are there for these two, Argo and Domon. But I think it's a matter of we can't look at them being able to understand the other one and allow themselves to be harmed or to go down a peg, because the further they are from the top, the more likely an accident could cause them to slip to the bottom. The closer you are to the top of the runs already, the more simple it is to just maintain your positioning. You know, that is how I perceive this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but obviously you have a differing opinion, and I'm curious.
I mean, that's it. Like, I'm just a little bored with Domon being able to like do everything, and so, but like, and that if that's how they wanted to end the episode, fine. But just Domon just stop saying like, I can't lose this, because at this point, I can't imagine there's many more battles left until the battle royale. So I don't believe you.
That's fair. I will say, I'm looking at the list right now. You won't have much longer.
Yeah.
Remember, I've always been giving this subtext of there being a Sentai aspect here.
Yeah.
As part of like the whole Super Robo vibe.
Yeah.
What have I said from the very beginning? Domon is our red in this case. And as such, he is going to get the most acknowledgement and is going to be leaning into the Gary Stu aspect of things, and only losing when that loss is going to be a benefit to himself. He had that happen back when he had his loss against Master Asia, until he was able to perfect his hyper mode aspect and get his little like cryptic training from Schwarzbruder. So I feel like it's important to recognize that while, yes, it can get boring to see him fight and get all these things that lets him get out of it. It's not about the active winning. It's about watching how this individual affects everybody else around him.
It is tough. In this section, it's tough to have it not be about winning when your structure is a tournament. The Highlands one I'm actually very okay with because he had to do all that training. He was having trouble doing it well. It was this sort of big climactic battle, and it was like this one attack he had kind of worked for. Comes with a new suit. There's a little bit here, but like 4 episodes in a row, he has 4 new secret techniques that come out of nowhere that just conveniently happen to defeat these opponents.
Listen, I was not a fan of the booster either, okay?
Like, I would like, you could have tried something a little different here. I don't know. Is more of this coming, or can we just, like, now he just uses these, now he has these techniques he can use in these upcoming battles?
I feel like because you're not accustomed to the way that specifically Super Sentai and Kamen Rider, 2 of the big 3, do things, this may be jarring for you. But okay. Truly and utterly, I can make no guarantees that any of these techniques that have been shown just now will recur at all, because oftentimes they are Deus Ex Machinas.
Okay. Well,
literally God Gundams.
Okay. That's okay. Then that's fine. I have no other sort of real notes on this. Yeah, I guess what makes the Russian guy interesting is because of his friends and because of this grisly rivalry thing. Like, he's got storyline that can take place outside of the tournament, where the other 3, they seem to be directly tied to the tournament. And so, like, that's interesting to me, that this grisly thing lingered over all these episodes from the first portion of it.
Well, yeah, it's another weight that Argo has to carry. Yeah. Argo is our strong man, both in terms of his physical prowess as well as his emotional. He is carrying the weight of his entire crew, the people that he cares about most, being under lockdown, with only him being the option to get them out. Mm-hmm. As an entire series of pirates who believe in the concept of freedom, you have him having to bear the weight of his new attack strictly on his machine's legs, and we don't even know if his legs would be able to sustain the Gaia Crusher as long as it does.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So we have that. We have the emotional weight that he carries, because he knows that his words mean nothing to Andrew Graham. So rather than try to fight it out with his emotions, he's willing to bear the burden that Graham has been putting on him for the decade or so, I believe it's been.
Yeah, all that. Since, very cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's good stuff, right?
Yeah, fan of that. Okay. You have any last thoughts on G Gundam before we move on?
No, I'm waiting for you to move us over to Gundam Wing.
Yes, Gundam Wing. I might kind of chip in every now and then, depending on what you talk about, because there's a lot of differences that the manga does, and we could kind of talk about them as you're bringing up points.
Sure. I mean, there's not a whole lot that I'm going to go ape on with this one, because everything seems pretty cut and dry, at least in terms of the way it's presented.
Yes.
I appreciate the stoic nature of Relina throughout her scenes of preparing herself before going before Romefeller and the rest of the world. And I appreciate that she does something that definitely does have some things that would need to be worked around, but I appreciate the idea of destroying the borders and becoming the world nation. On the one hand, yeah, it sounds awful and it sounds exactly like what a totalitarian would want. But on the other hand, if you can avoid the totalitarian dictatorship that would often associate with this sort of thing, I can see why this would be a boon. This would be beneficial to the world as we've progressed. And I've actually been a proponent for such a thing before I die.
So this is actually interesting from a modern viewing, because it feels like our society has kind of moved towards people like upholding these kind of their cultural backgrounds and celebrating them more. And I imagine the dissipation of world borders would kind of lead to these cultural slippage happening in this.
And that's exactly one of the big issues that I would say is a part of this idea of a world nation, but continue.
Well, that's it. So like, yeah, a lot of people are kind of for that. And I think I think a very helpful thing would be this melting pot kind of aesthetic where it doesn't have to be appropriation. It can just be like we're so integrated now within each other and we're not kind of isolating ourselves by these cultural definitions that are really just sort of genetic holdovers, that it makes it easier. We can focus less on the differences at that point because they're not really in your face anymore.
I do agree with the conceit that as we've been developing into a globalist society due to the age of the internet and the development of technology rapidly advancing over the course of the past 4 decades, it just makes sense to me from a practical standpoint at this moment that so long as we were able to find answers to the idea of cultural identity at this point, other than that, and maybe 1 or 2 things that are slipping my mind in this very moment, economically, sociologically, governmentally, I guess.
Okay.
We should basically just turn into a single unit, because the only difference is really what kinds of laws do we want to keep? Because, like, I don't want everybody to feel like we have to be under an American style democracy, but at the same time, I definitely don't want us to be under a Maoist regime. So, like there would have to be a way to find a median, a sort of meeting ground where we can all start understanding that. But that's when I start getting into my hippie talk. So
yeah. So that is pretty much the same in the manga. There's no difference there other than the fact that it happens much earlier than the rest of the events of this episode.
I like that we've gotten a kind of through line to get Trowa back into the fray. It was very interesting to see to what lengths Catherine will go to keep Trowa safe. And I know that you mentioned, I think you said it only comes up in the movie and or the manga, but Catherine is legitimately Trowa's sister. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's only in the manga.
By birth, or is it just like adoptive?
That I don't know, but the scene we see is like Catherine and her family with a baby, Trowa, escaping from an alliance battle somewhere in Eastern Europe. And because they're running away in the rain and mortar shells are also firing near them, it jumbles up a bit, the baby falls out, but the horses keep running, and then that baby gets found by these mercenaries and he's raised by them. So they are, so I don't know if they just found that baby as they were running away, but I think the Occam's razor here is that they're actually blood relatives, but they don't know it, and there's somewhere inside of her is this vestigial sisterly bond, or maybe she's thinking of that brother she never got to take care of, and this is like her way to atone.
But I do appreciate too this understanding over time that she has to come to the conclusion that she can't just protect this person who knows what his duty is forever and make it so that way he is incapable of taking care of himself. On the Japanese side, because I don't know how they read it on the American, the word that is used to describe Trowa as he walks away from Catherine in the tent before he gets in the shuttle is, she keeps calling him Baka. And more often than not, it's used to describe someone who is an idiot or stupid. I'm to understand that based on the subtitles that I was reading, you got the word crazy.
Crazy describing him?
Describing him as he's walking away from the tent just before going out into space to help with Hatra. That
I don't remember. I don't think so.
Okay, well, that would be a good thing because, one, we shouldn't be calling people crazy. Come the fuck on. But two, it is more believable to say, and I will say specifically, idiot. I've come to understand, if you really want to get down to the breaking down of a word, idiot is just a person who acts on their id, their instinct. And a lot of people on this planet are idiots. But you have to take away the connotation that it means the same thing as ignorant or stupid or dumb. Completely different word. cannot be used synonymously if we understand it for where the base comes from. So in this case, yeah, Trowa is an idiot. He is acting on his baser instincts of what he knows inside him is true compared to the reality, if you were to add facts and logic and everything else, that going out into space in the middle of a war, not good. Especially if you don't necessarily remember any, if at all, of your training that you've had over the course of your 16 years or however long you've been on this planet.
Yeah, I actually, as you're saying this, I think she uses the word stupid.
Well, stupid would also apply here from the word baka.
It is closer to that idiot connotation than crazy would be.
When Noin tries to have her interaction earlier in the episode with Mufei, she, before getting down to meet with him, talks about his strong sense of justice. Again, we come to this place where in the Japanese, she is saying the word seigi. Seigi translates in a direct sense to justice, but the connotations, again, could imply integrity, which is the word that you keep hearing on your side.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see Wu Fei in his current arc. I, as a person, don't love it, but I understand where it's coming from a story point. He is hurting. He is effectively still a child.
Yep.
And he is trying to act on what he believes is the dying wish of the only people that he knew to take care of him, especially after the loss of his child wife.
Yes. I mean, the way
his betrothed,
yes.
I don't know whether or not they
were married.
Tied the knot before she passed.
They did, yep. It was an arranged marriage, so it was just not very ceremonious. But the phrase he uses in English that piques my interest, that he says as he's destroying these guns on the moon base, is like, when the weak have weapons, they give into their minds. And so this is, I guess, this id you're talking about, or these emotional state, but what he's fighting for, these people, they're fighting out of fear or they're fighting out of anger, and he does not find that to be a sense of integrity, and he finds that these things are causing more conflicts. And so where Catcher was just destroying all people, Wu Fei now seems to be focusing on destroying weapons and mobile dolls, because if he can disarm these weak people, then these wars will just stop inevitably. Now, notably, he doesn't do that. He doesn't do that or ask Noin to do that. So to some degree, he must either respect her or find that she has this idea of integrity, even if he's not willing to fight the fight she's fighting.
Well, I agree with that, but I will say that literally just the episode prior, he was killing indiscriminately between doll and person piloting.
I know. To fix that, to make this show better, I would give there a bridge moment there, or you just clean up the earlier part. But they needed to do that so that they could kill off Tubarov in that way. And this is why I think the manga doesn't have that so much, because they're dealing with Tubarov in a different way. So again, that's something I would clean up too, because it is quite the pivot. And if he's going to do that, fine, but we need to see why.
I appreciate how tied Catra is to Trowa, and I can see why the BL mangas around those two would probably do well. Because
the what?
BL.
What's BL?
Boys love. Yaoi.
Is this other fan fiction?
Yeah, BL is just the word that one would use, where instead of just saying yaoi in the way that we understand it to mean gay, homosexual.
Okay.
BL, standing for boys love, is just a way for people to have their, instead of yaoi, which is possibly more on the sexual end, boys love can just be like, oh, it's romance and it's sweet and, it's spicy, but it's not like, oh, hey, let's have everybody nakes and just P and B. We don't have to do that. That aside, Catra and Trowa have a strong enough relationship at whatever level you're choosing to read it at. Catra is willing to continue to return to make sure that Trowa stays safe and is trying to atone for the weight of his actions. While I could use this point as my way we go, I'm not going to, because I have something else I want to touch on. I appreciate that every one of the 4 that we actually spend time with, of the 5 Gundam fighters, they all feel like war veterans. Even though it's not even been a full year, I'm to understand.
Yes. Other than Catra, they do all have a strong history of battle and fighting and training and things like that. So it fits for most of them. Catra, I would play a little differently early on, especially if we were to redo this.
How would you play him?
Like a little greener, but that plays into well with him and this heart of space stuff and this big compassion thing and kind of not. Kind of being more distant to violent. He's definitely the more peace idealist of it. And that way, when you get to him in the Zero suit, like that transformation feels all the more horrifying because the war has really gotten to him.
Sure, certainly. But I will then have to ask, just in the sake of this conversation, wouldn't that take away from the idea of the Maganat Corps and Catra having such a bond if he hadn't been doing some kind of fighting with the Maganat Corps beforehand? I don't think that we would have had that kind of development of a family outside of his effectively estranged family.
Well, one, the fact that he has a Maganat Corps kind of hints at the fact that he's less combat capable because he needs to have 40 dudes helping him out. But two, he befriends them before any of them even have mobile suits. He befriends them out in space because they're being... in these mines, they're being kind of held as like prisoners to work in the mines for kind of small petty crimes. And so the four main guys we see, led by Rashid, are trying to like hold winner people or like other hot colony execs hostage to get their people released. And like Catra disarms that problem more with words than with actual fighting. So I think there is that background is sort of set where he's not really doing much fighting with them. Then they want to repay him, and that's why they help him out when he lands on Earth.
That's fair. That does make sense. So that leaves me with, obviously, our last two pilots, Duo, and I'll save Hero for last because I have questions. But with Duo, it's interesting to see him, for a moment, try to see if he can't just live a quote-unquote normal life, but he also acknowledges that he has to be a god of death and that he's willing to sacrifice a life of happiness if it means that he can do something that will keep other people from having to feel that kind of separation and pain. And it does lend a little more to this idea of him always having the happy face on because he's known nothing but hardship. You tell me that he started off as a thief, found his way into the Death Scythe, and then from there, being the heart of gold type of thief that he is, ends up carrying that burden of having to be a part of a war after the fact.
Yeah, the interesting note about Duo, which thankfully is never really overtly stated, is he has the most affinity with the colonies, and he's the most emotionally affected by them, by the Gundam pilots becoming enemies of the colonies, and is the most depressed that they are now forming the White Fang and continuing the cycle of war. And like he says in this episode, I don't want any of these guys fighting. I'm fine doing it all by myself. That's what I should be doing, and they should be staying out of this. And so like he's sort of heart-wrenched by it. Yeah. So that's what sort of that's his kind of demarcation to the rest of them.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I'm pointing out here is the fact that he says that he is supposed to be the one fighting on his own and is terrified at the fact that these people are trying to perpetuate this war in this understanding that they are effectively on the right side of the whole thing. And had we started this story at this point, yeah, I'd be willing to believe that the White Fang were the good guys. But there is no good guy here. This is just, as you said, a continuation of war.
Yeah.
This is where I would say I still root for Duo as my potential favorite of the 5 primary pilots, is that he is the archetype that I find the most affinity with, which is the person willing to carry other people's weight while keeping a smile on to keep them from worrying about themselves. That's depression. Depression is very clear once you know the markings. That kid has got some depression.
Yeah, everybody he befriends when he was growing up, they all die. So, like, It's part of why he takes on this mantle of God of Death. If you notice, the circus is called A Circus. Great circus name. Nobody's confused about what's going on there. Here are, I guess, to your earlier point about the White Fang and how you would feel if they were at the beginning, the show is starting to show signs of, it's not quite slippage, but it's beginning to hint at kind of problematic things that kind of deflate the overall ending of the show, where it has a tough time reconciling its theme in a realistic robo context, where Catherine yells at Catra and saying, we just want to live in peace, keep us out of this. But essentially what's going on in the battle is she doesn't want Trowa to fight to help the White Fang or to fight against the White Fang. But at some point, one of these, that means just one of these two people are going to rule them, and she's okay with either of them. And so, and that's fine, but like the implication she seems to think is if we just don't want to be involved because we want to be in peace. But at some point, no matter who wins, it probably won't lead to peace, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean that she is the perfect shadow of what Relina would have done had she not taken on the mantle of being the leader of the Saint Kingdom.
Yeah, so in a way, they have to do the fighting or the problem won't be fixed, but the show wants to have this theme of all wars bad and we don't want pacifism, but if we don't fight these wars, you know, we can't get rid of these problems. And so there's a bit of weakage there that I would take a look at if we were redoing this. Now, as what happens in the manga, as I said, this Trowa stuff happens long after Relina is coronated. And so, and Noin and Catra don't leave after Relina surrenders. They leave when she coronates herself because they're like, if she's now captured by Romefeller, we're going to be enemies of the whole world. So we got to go hide in space. Catra doesn't run into Duo because Duo's still dealing with Wu Fei and Zex and the Zero suit there. So Catra's sister that we saw earlier in the series tells him, hey, you had us look into this Trowa thing while we found him. Romefeller's agents are attacking the colony because the White Fang has stolen the Libra, so they take the colony hostage to get the Libra back from the White Fang. Hero in the Wing Zero is already in space because this happens later, and so he's the one in the colony, not Catra, attacking all of these Oz military suits that are holding it ransom. And somehow the Heavy Arms is now on this colony too, and Trowa has to get in it and instinctually remembers how to fight to help defeat them as well, though he thinks he's getting into the Heavy Arms because he remembers the Wing Zero destroying colonies and almost killing him, so he actually thinks he has to go fight the Wing Zero, but then Hero reminds him that the only way to live a good life is to follow your emotions, and so that's kind of what turns Hero to fight these Oz soldiers. Meanwhile, Noin hopes to convince these Oz soldiers to stop because she has trained most of them, you may remember. And so she tries to reason with them. Two of the Oz soldiers that are on this mission are Alex and Mueller, who you may remember Zex killing early on when he was underwater with them. Well, that didn't happen in the manga, so they're here, being the same dicks they were earlier. And so Wu Fei has to come in and save her. And this is where he chastises her for the lack of integrity, where he says, do not hesitate. If you have no resolve, then you will never bring an end to this era. That's how that kind of happens there. I think the only thing I would change in those is Trowa fighting immediately. That's sort of it. Because I like in here where he's just like, I think I have to go help them. I don't know why, but something is wrong with Catra, and I want to help him. And then he flies a ship. He doesn't have his mobile suit yet. You have to work him up to being able to fight again and have him earn it more. But everything else I'm actually kind of into, and I think plays into the themes better.
I do think that it was important to point out Catherine's problematic stance on the matter.
Yeah.
But it's also probably the most realistic in terms of how most people would manage themselves in this. It's kind of like a less driven version of what one of the refugees who were just within or just on the very outskirts of the Saint Kingdom were talking about. The old man that Catra hung out with for a bit.
Yeah, and on the record, I like that too. I like that she does it. It becomes problematic when then the show kind of like washes all the problems away at the end, and they're like, peace for everybody, because now you kind of lose the potency that a line like that or this character believing that could have. Yeah. That's where you just sort of like, it has a nice little bow wrapped up at the end, and we're like, we did it. So that's where I think the slippage kind of occurs. And then lastly, I really like this montage we get at the end where we see all these people reacting to Relina's speech, and Noin's disappointed, and Duo seems upset about it. And interestingly, Trey's goes, "Oh, Romefeller, you dumb fucks. You're getting it now."
Yeah, I love that.
And so that was pretty fun too. And then, yeah, we see Hero's look at the end there. That could be read a few different ways. And I won't talk about what I think it is because I know what happens in later episodes. But yeah, now we can go to the way we go.
Like sand through the hourglass, this is the way that we go.
Something that media seems to always get wrong outside of maybe Memento is amnesia. we have, it's just this easy thing where a coconut falls on Gilligan's head and he remembers nothing, and you get some laughs out of it, and there you go. I don't know how I would redo this section because I like the idea of Hero of Trowa having to like start from scratch, because other than that he doesn't really have much of this arc. A little bit of learning from Hero, but that's not sort of strengthened through the rest. So now he has to kind of rebuild and look at it through not child soldier eyes anymore, but kind of these more nascent eyes. So I don't know if there's kind of like some PTSD thing we can look about or some repression thing we could kind of have. But this thing would just like, he doesn't remember anything. He has amnesia. I go like, what the fuck? Why are you so lazy, show? And we're just misinforming the public on medical things. That's my little amnesia rant.
You could go the route that 50 First Dates had.
Yeah.
Which was the idea that a portion of the brain experienced memory loss. And because I don't quite know how the rest of this will play out for Trowa, whether or not he gets a reversion back to his former self or not, if he does not, you can then apply the idea that he had some sort of long-term memory loss and is able to maintain the short-term, and then that raises questions for how he has to be cared for after we get through some of the story stuff. You can do it 10 years later and see how Trowa is managing, because that would then give a better sense of disability in a world filled with realistic war. I have a family member who, due to some trauma they had in their youth, they have a lot of memory blocks to this day and age where they can't remember anything prior to sometime in their late teens, or at least it's intermittent that they remember things, and other parts are completely blacked out.
So that I think would be the way to take advantage of it, where like he's blocking out a lot of the trauma. And so since most of his life has been trauma, he could like find Catherine because those are the moments in his life where there weren't any. And so he remembers her, and he remembers working for the circus, and all that time where we don't know he's like tracking her down, and not just like, oh, happens to be where Catherine is. And then Catherine takes him in. But if Trowa comes back and like he's much more doting on Catherine and acting like the younger brother, Catherine could then take advantage of that. I think that would be an interesting thing to play with.
Well, the way I go this week is wondering why we were using a fantasy or Star Wars-y trope with the idea of hearing an unheard sound. In Gundam Wing, we have a moment where both Hero and Relina call out to each other in a certain way. We have it at first with Relina towards the beginning of the episode where she's looking at herself in the mirror after she's been set, and she calls out very to herself quietly, Hero. And we cut to Hero out in the middle of a forest scape hacking at his OS and turning around as though he just heard her call out at the top of her lungs over this canyon. Like, he hears it, but doesn't recognize it, so he goes back to hacking. Felt very Star Wars-y to me.
Yeah, the only thing we're missing from this classic anime trope is Hiro sneezing when we cut to him. But yeah, I would cut it out too.
This is where it's funny to me. And I say Star Wars because the way it's used here feels very much like when Leia calls out to Luke during Empire or something like that. In G Gundam, we have a similar situation when Dr. Bellinger, I think his name is, the doctor who made the Berserker system.
Yeah.
As he has some electricity pumped to his brain in a way of torturing him, he screams out, and then just in the middle of a busy street, we see Allenby turn around and be unsure as to what she might have heard. It's not that she acknowledges it as something wrong with somebody, and it's not like she hears her name, but she knows something is off. Again, this reacting to something that deep in your collective unconscious, your soul, what have you, you hear a thing and it causes enough concern for you to react. I find it interesting that is a trope that we still stick to.
Yeah, I think unlike the Star Wars example, the one with Hiro isn't meant, like, he's not actually hearing her. But like it's like when Trowa says, like, I can feel Catra crying. It's like they wanted to kind of set up this link between the two. But I think it would be more interesting to have Relina be like, Hiro, what should I do? And then Hiro's doing like the exact opposite, or like fighting in his own way. And like you get a nice dichotomy there. But just from cutting to her to him gives us that link anyway.
I think there is something deep within us that wants to believe that is something that we might have with someone else, that we would react to somebody else or that they would react to us.
Yeah,
You can disagree because I know that you're a person who likes to be a hermit. That's fine.
No, it's not even that. To some degree, I agree with you, but the way we've been seeing it in these shows, like they used to feel too cartoonish, and especially because it's actually kind of a product of ego. Like it's these two are connected. Versus kind of like letting go of the ego and being in that fabric. The one who does this trope better, because they're not doing it in that way, the only time I've sort of believed it has been that movie Your Name. And again, it's not, because it's more about just like this familiarity you have with someone. It's not this kind of deep connection. It's just like, I don't know, it's like a life you did live with them but wasn't there, and like this is a way to kind of explain the familiarity rather than like forging a bond between people regardless of distance. So that was why I found that more interesting and believable. All right, well, now we can take a walk over to the Nerd Corner.
Let's take a walk to the Nerd Corner, where we will talk about a lot of nerd stuff.
Yeah. When I was last week, of course, I talked about the new Gorillaz album, and somewhere in my research of that, I came across this new band called Sad Night Dynamite, and they're these two brothers also from the UK. And why they piqued my interest, because they were like, these new brothers have released their first album, and it's like a cross between Gorillaz and iMonster and Portishead. And I thought, I love all those things. And they're all mixed up in here. And indeed, it's a very small album. It's about 30 minutes. They're just getting started. They don't have a lot of, resources to put it out. It's called Mixtape, but it is fantastic. It's like a very dark, kind of moody style. And I found it because the Gorilla front man, Damon Albarn, talked about how great it is, and he was a big fan of it and is excited to see what they'll do going forward. So if you can find Sad Night Dynamite, it's available to download pretty much everywhere you would think to download them. Great, and I highly recommend them. It's a cool new sound they have.
Well, I'm going to be greedy and have two.
Okay, go ahead.
The one that I said at the beginning of the episode, I just recently got my own kit of the voice straw. I may have mentioned it a week or two ago, back when I was going to that voiceover summit being done by the Svara Project. One of the two people that founded the Svara Project, Mindy Pack, developed this straw technique to use for people who are vocalists. She worked with a lot of scientists and doctors who specialize in vocal work, and developed these 4 simple straws and the exercises that go with them. And if you do them correctly and do them consistently, it does keep your throat from grinding against itself like sandpaper or something of the like. Because when you use your voice, especially when you're putting pressure behind it, you are having your vocal folds rub up against each other because that's where your voice decided it wanted to develop. But it can be improved upon, much like if you have weak arms, and you do just some simple curls every now and again, or ideally consistently. So I would highly recommend you look into it if you are a vocalist of your own kind, whether that's a voice actor, a singer, a public speaker, or anything in between. You should go to voicestraw.com. And you should look into maybe purchasing a kit for yourself. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, you're going to be spending about $70 to get a full kit. And that kit will include all the straws you'll need. It'll include the cups that are used for some of the other vocalizations. And you get an entire pack of exercises built for you on the generic level, of course. You will purchase a 2-ounce bottle of this soap that is recommended for it, but you can use dish soap if you really want. My second one is just Vaporwave. Just in general, Vaporwave.
What is that?
I was waiting for you to say that, Grandpa.
Why? I don't know. Who knows? What is it? Tell me, and then we'll decide if most people should know it.
Vaporwave started back in the early 10s, where somebody took... Do you remember Echo the Dolphin?
I sure do. It's one of my favorite Sega games. Probably my favorite Sega game, in fact.
Well, that's good to know, because a lot of people ascribe the first real Vaporwave album to somebody having taken the soundtrack from that and making their own alterations to it to create this vibe that is similar to the music that you hear in the game, but there's a sense of foreboding in some places that you might not have expected. Most people will acknowledge that the primary producer of Vaporwave is an album called Floral Shop, shop being spelled with 2 P's and an E, made by then named Microsoft Plus. The artist is named Vectroid, Vektroid. But everybody has, if they've ever heard of Vaporwave at all, they have seen this cover and they have heard at least the 3rd track on the album. Most of the tracks are written out in Japanese. That is a statement that's gone back and forth through Translate a number of times, so that way it means less and less of anything. So for those of you who have not listened to anything Vaporwave before, just look it up. You'll see the art. You'll find a few albums. At the very least, listen to Floral Shop by Microsoft Plus and start going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I should not be expected to know what that is. I bet that seems niche. I bet most people wouldn't know.
You can ask them to ask us on zakutalkcast@gmail.com.
Well, what another great episode this week, Bob. Let's thank Lev Van Rensselaer for making it sound pretty good. And of course, let me thank my guest this week, and each and every week this season, Bob Skerry. Bob, do you have any plugs?
Certainly. Hey, hi, Worldwide Sentai. This is Bob Skerry VOA coming at you live from Zaku Talk HQ. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a slew of other places by my handle, Bob Skerry VOA. You can also go to bobskerryvoa.com, which is currently going under a new level of construction, to listen to my demos, because I am in fact a voiceover artist. Please feel free to listen to my character, commercial, promotion, and narration demos, because I'm ready to be hired and I feel like my voice is good for you. So if you don't mind, maybe you could just let me do some voices for you.
Is your site have like the little picture of the construction worker and like the blockades behind him?
No, and it also doesn't have a picture of a bee saying "We'll be right back."
No, I've not seen that. That one's new to me.
You used to watch title cards for technical difficulties back in the 90s. You should know.
I don't remember the bee, though. I've seen a lot, but not the bee. I am your host, Patrick Scalo. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, video essays, animations, behind-the-scenes footage, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com and social media, presumably, with a similar sounding name. Thank you all for listening. Bob, tell the audience what you think really happened to Amelia Earhart.
Amelia Earhart is living comfortably in the sky because she has become a mechanical angel. She is part plane and part person.
Just one beat.